Welcome back to the fifth video in our franchise fundamentals series. This episode is going to be about due diligence and research to ultimately help you find if this business opportunity is going to be the right one to move forward with. First, we're going to explain what due diligence looks like within the franchise space, and then give you a 5-step process in order to adequately do due diligence and make sure that this franchise opportunity is worth moving forward with. So what is due diligence? Most people understand that term in a general sense. It's about doing your homework, but specifically in the franchise application, it's about taking what the franchisor is saying and being able to find sources that will back up that as being true and not just marketing language. Now, when you're evaluating new franchise opportunities, what I like for you to do is take the term due diligence and replace it with development. So the development process with a franchise brand is the totality of the conversations that you're going to be having with them, from the initial phone call spanning all the way through until decision time, where you ultimately are deciding, is this something that I think is viable that I want to move forward with? This is your due diligence period. Now, there's some aspects within here that are a little more specific, but totality, development, or the development process is what I want you to think of when you hear the term due diligence. So the first step in this process is to evaluate the franchisor with the FDD. So the FDD, the franchise disclosure document, we went over a deep dive in our last episode, but that's essentially the most simplified version of what the franchisor is offering. So you're able to really evaluate the franchisor first by looking through the FDD and seeing what they have to say, right? You can see about any litigation that they have. You can see what their fees are. You can see what the initial investment is going to be, the earnings claim, the trend in their business, whether they're going up or down. So that's the first step in terms of doing due diligence, is really understanding what the FDD is saying and then making an evaluation of who these people are. Within the FDD, you can see how long the franchisor has been in operation. If they've been in operation for 50 years and they've never had any litigation, and they've seen year-over-year growth in sales, and their total number of units has either been growing or staying consistent over the past few years, that's a really good sign that you have a stable model that's here to last. So the first step to evaluating or doing due diligence on a franchise opportunity is really evaluating the franchisor through the FDD. The second step is doing local research on market demand. I always use this analogy. I could have the best snow removal franchise in the world, and they make a ton of money, but ultimately, if you live in Florida and it doesn't snow, it's irrelevant. It's not going to be a good business for you to engage in. So you're not going to be able to have super insightful visions of exactly what your market has to offer, but ultimately you want to make sure it's viable. If you live in an area where there's a ton of Mexican food, right? A Mexican franchise may not do well because there's so many other good options that are local, authentic, and they've been there forever. A new, more like commercialized Mexican system might not work in that market. I'm not saying that it won't, but that's just something that you want to factor in, similarly to the snow removal analogy. So you're going to do that on your own, but you're also going to be working with the franchisor during that development process to really evaluate your local market, because with a good franchise brand, they will be able to tell you on at least a numerical basis if they think it's even viable in your market. And I have plenty of franchisors that won't do business in a specific area because they know it's either too small or it doesn't have the household income that their brand really needs to see in order to typically do well. So they'll be frank with you. They'll be upfront and say, hey, we don't think your market is available. Maybe there's a neighboring market that would work, and that's up to you whether you want to move forward in, an area that's not right in your backyard. But ultimately, the franchisor will work with you on this aspect of the business, but you need to be the local expert. The franchisor, no matter where they're located, unless they happen to be in your backyard, they don't understand your area. They can look at your area on a map and use numbers and data to see if it looks viable, but you are going to be the local expert, and you have to have that hat. You have to be the person to say, I know what my market needs. I at least have an idea of what it needs, or some industries that I know won't work here, and be critical, because if you have a market demand, obviously it makes sense to move forward. And if you don't, it doesn't. But you have to be that determinant factor. The franchisor is going to be able to support you with numbers, but you have to be the local expert. The third step in this process is evaluating how a brand treats their development process. So we've already gone over what development is. It's the full conversation you're going to be having with the brand to really learn about what they're offering. But how a brand treats their development process can be very telling to their system as a whole. And I'll explain what I mean. As you're going through development, if you feel like it is a sales process, that's typically a sign that you're speaking with a not so good brand. The reason being is good franchise brands are not selling territory, they're awarding territory. So just as you as a prospective candidate is interviewing the brand to say, okay, is this company going to be able to help me achieve my goals? Are they going to be able to have a good business model I can follow? Are they going to give me the support that I need? You're interviewing them, and rightfully so. With a good franchise brand, they're doing the same thing with you. Because if you think about franchising in its whole, right? How does a franchisor make its money? A franchisor makes its money based on the royalty that a local franchisee can produce, because it's a percentage of top line revenue, right? So as a good franchise brand, when they look at their territory map, it's limited. They only have so many territories that they're able to sell. So if they sell a territory that's in a prime area to someone that they don't think is going to do well in their system, it's an opportunity loss for them. Because if they think that market is worth $1 million in revenue and a bad operator is only producing $200,000 in revenue, they just missed out on $800,000 of top line to be able to take a royalty from. So the good franchise brands are going to be interviewing you as much as you're interviewing them. Now let's compare this to a bad brand or a not so good brand. They might know that their franchise system is not particularly perfect, and maybe it works in some areas, maybe it doesn't work in others, maybe they don't have the systems in place, but ultimately their goal is to fill the map as quickly as possible, because they know if they throw as much as they can at the board, enough is going to stick. Some are going to do well, some aren't, but ultimately they're going to be okay because they have so much volume. So not so great franchise brands are going to treat their development process like a sales process versus an interview that's a little bit more critical. So as you're speaking with the brand, pay attention to things that they're saying to you. Does it feel like you're kind of getting interviewed? Does it feel like they're being a little bit critical about you following their protocols and whatnot? That's actually a good sign that they have a good system, because they want to make sure that you are going to be a good fit for them as well. If every time you get on a call, it's just, sell, and we're so good, we're so this, that might be a sign that you're talking to a not so good brand, because they really want to get you excited, hyped up, and get you across the finish line so they can move on to the next. So that is an important piece as you're having conversations with the brand to make sure you're evaluating, how are they treating me? The more it feels like an interview process in a two-way street, that's a better sign that you're talking to a good brand. Step 4 is speaking with current franchisees, also known as validation. So during this development process you're going to be having with these brands, there's going to be a period of time called validation where you're able to contact any franchisee in the system. This is going to be huge on due diligence, because you're able to validate what the brand is claiming that they do in terms of support for their franchisees, and everything they're telling you during development. You're able to talk to people who are actually doing what you're looking to do and see what the real view is. If you do validation calls and everybody across the board says that the support is great and everything the franchisor told them in development wound up being true, and there hasn't been any surprises, at least no major ones, and they had issues that the franchisor was able to work with them through, that's a good sign. It's like hearing a real-time review from someone who, again, is doing what you're potentially looking to do. Alternatively, validation is a great place to figure out what additional questions you want to ask the franchisor on your next call. So as you're talking to franchisees, if there seems to be a trend that no one was really prepared for the amount of marketing that was going to have to be spent, and what they said in the FDD wasn't necessarily wrong, but they're all spending way more than what the FDD says that they're projected to. That's an important piece to bring up to the franchisor so that they are able to address that piece. It's not to say that just because a franchisee is spending more on their marketing than the franchisor initially outlaid, that they're lying or that they're a bad model. But again, you are trying to protect yourself. You're trying to get a realistic expectation of what it's going to take to do well in this business model. And the validation calls are an excellent way to extract not only good information, but give you direction to ask more calculated questions to the franchisor to really get a full picture painted on exactly what this business model offers. And step 5 is leveraging professional help during this process. Assuming this is your first potential franchise investment, there's going to be some terms you're not familiar with. You're not going to really know what corners to look around. Even if you have good business acumen, the franchise space has some nuance that you definitely want to be educated on. So there's 2 primary professionals that I would recommend leaning on to help you make the best decision. The first, unshameful plug, franchise consultants. We are able to give you a perspective on franchise brands that you might not be able to see because we work with hundreds of brands every single day, full time. We know what brands typically have good validation. We know what good brands like to hear during development in order to evaluate you being a good candidate. We know some behind the scenes information about just general trends. It's important to lean on us, especially because it doesn't cost you anything. Our referral fee is paid through the franchisor. It doesn't change your fee structure. At the very least, you get some valuable inside information that you wouldn't get if you were working on your own. And ultimately, we don't care what brand you go with as long as it matches up with what you're looking to do. So us having the ability to give you a multitude of different options in different industries allows for you to be able to have a more well-rounded perspective on exactly what opportunities exist, specifically for your, again, skill sets, goals, and lifestyle. The second professional that I would recommend you leverage is a franchise attorney. Now, they're going to be working with you specifically through the FDD evaluation as well as the franchise agreement review. So those are the 2 legal documents that you definitely want to have legal counsel to advise you on because they're going to be able to say, hey, this is the section you want to pay attention to. This is what could be the most problematic. This language here is, saying X, Y, and Z. You're going to be able to get a better view of not what the words are saying, but what the words mean by talking to that franchise attorney. So specifically with the FDD and the franchise agreement, make sure to leverage a franchise attorney to get some really good clarity and additional information to go on. So doing your due diligence, doing the proper due diligence as you're investigating franchise opportunities is vitally important for your success as a franchisee. So don't treat this process lightly. Really evaluate the opportunity heavily. You're going to be excited. If you find a really good brand you want to move forward with, that's awesome. But make sure you don't lose that critical eye so you can really make an informed decision on whether this opportunity is going to be right for you. So after watching this video, you should have a pretty good idea on how to do your due diligence and research. If you're liking this information, make sure to click on our next video, which is going to go through some financing options for your potential new franchise. And I'll give you a little hint. You don't have to have cash. There are a number of financing means available that you might not know exist. So make sure to watch that video if financing is going to be of interest with your franchise business.